Uh-oh. Let's see, can you see my screen?
Yep, we're just seeing some PDFs.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Marguerite. I work with Alta Planning and Design. I'm a senior graphic designer here. Some of you may remember me from the June Netwrok call, where we talked a little bit about the existing logo. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a few things today. Let's see here. So first, our process in this, the research overview, the round 1 of designs, and then the round 2 of designs. So some of you may have seen this before, but this is kind of our process in the logo designs.
Marguerite, we're still just seeing the first page of those PDFs.
Okay.
I don't know if you have a presentation
Apologies.
mode or something.
Okay, let me get out of this mode really quick.
Looks like something's changing.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, maybe I just can't be in full screen, so sorry about that. So this is our process. So we start with defining the problem, kind of the overall scope, what we're looking at. Then we moved into the discover phase. So that was gathering research, talking to you all about what we wanted this logo to look like, what we should make sure it encompasses. Then we moved into design, where we did the first round of designs. Now we're in the refine stage, and then we will implement it. So just showing that we're in the refine stage at the moment. And then a little bit about our research process. So as some of you may remember on the June Netwrok call, we asked a few questions about like what's currently working and not working about the Minnesota Safe Routes to School logo. So here's just a little bit of the feedback that we got, which was all really, really awesome and interesting. So there's a lot going on. It feels like 4 logos. I like the inclusivity of the modes. I like the inclusion of the wheelchair. The green isn't ADA compliant. I like the parent with the kid to highlight togetherness, and that the logo doesn't reduce well in size to a 1-color system. This is all super interesting and one of the first steps in the process. And later on in June, we did a 90-minute branding workshop with the Minnesota Safe Routes to School Steering Committee. And this was super fun. We did a lot of awesome activities, got a lot of great feedback. So here's one of the questions we asked. What parts of Minnesota Safe Routes to School are you most proud of? So partnership, safety, activity, inclusive, focusing on equity. So all super interesting, good answers. And we also asked, if Minnesota Safe Routes to School were a person, how would you describe them? Caring, welcoming, active, inclusive, strategic. So super interesting to hear all of this. And then one of the last questions that we asked in this branding workshop was, what's the most important idea or feeling you would like the Minnesota Safe Routes to School new logo to convey or evoke? And I realize this might be a little bit small, but some of the things were fun and resourceful, active, togetherness, safe, fun, and healthy lifestyle, healthy, active kids. It's all about the kids. So really cool feedback there. And we also did a brand audit. So we looked at the existing brand and to see what was working and what wasn't working. So we looked at the logo, we looked at the illustration style in the logo, we looked at the font, we looked at the colors, we looked at the website. So both like how it looked and how it functioned, and we looked at additional collateral. And we also looked at 6 peers. So we looked at these peers just from kind of a visual branding standpoint, not from a programmatic standpoint. But we talked about which of these logos were most successful, what we liked about each of these logos. If some of these logos were more geared towards younger kids or older kids, or if they were more serious or more fun. So that was a really interesting exercise as well. And then from all of that research, we kind of distilled down all the things that we heard and had all these takeaways, and then we moved into the first round of design. So these were the first 4 logo concepts that we showed you all, or everyone that was included on Dave's emails. So there were 4 concepts and a couple of variations within each concept. And then we put this all into SurveyMonkey and had folks vote on their favorite, what they thought was the most successful, which would be the best for the program, that kind of thing. And overwhelmingly, this concept 3B was the favorite. So here's just kind of a snapshot of the survey results. Concept 3 being most favored and kind of the other results there. So we looked at all the comments and Dave distilled all that feedback to kind of give us a clear path forward in refining this concept. So we move into design refinement. So this is an iteration on that logo. One thing that we found was that we should reduce the size of the word Minnesota, because the shape of the state is already in the logo. And also we want to emphasize the word safe routes to school, because that was really the most important thing. So changing the hierarchy a little bit. And then in this specific iteration, the illustration style has stayed the same, or this kind of icon style illustration, if you will. And here's another variation on that exact same logo lockup, which uses silhouette style logos. So those being a little bit more reminiscent of actual people and kind of their personalities. And there are pros and cons to both of those illustration styles. So if I back up for 1 second, this one is going to reduce to small sizes better and be a little bit more recognizable at that small size. And then this one has a little bit more personality. Like you could see the backpacks a little bit better. It feels like they're going to school. So those are kind of the pros and cons of those 2 icons, or those 2 illustration styles. Then there's also this lockup, which uses the icon style illustration, but kind of puts it under an arch to kind of emphasize that togetherness of the program. And then the same thing, but with the silhouette style illustrations in there. So those are kind of the 4 options right now that we'll have you vote on later. And we're also looking at color palettes in this round. So overwhelmingly, through talking to you and through our research, we realized that we want a logo that can pair well with the Minnesota existing brand, but can have its own personality. So they look good together, they can sit next to each other, these 2 logos, but this has its own kind of, personality, identity, that kind of thing. So at the bottom is a small snapshot of how these logos might look in this color palette. Minnesota blue and Minnesota accent teal are pulled directly from the Minnesota brand. And then I added in 2 additional colors, this light cyan and this watermelon color, to kind of warm it up, give it a little personality, make it feel fun and active, that kind of thing. And here's just how this would look, one of the options next to the Minnesota logo. So you can see that, they feel like they could be part of the same family, but they have their own kind of identity. And this is the second color palette. So it's called High Contrast. And all 4 of these colors actually are pulled from the existing Minnesota brand. So luckily, the color palette is really deep in the existing brand. So we pulled out the Minnesota blue, again, the Minnesota accent teal, Minnesota extended accent gold, Minnesota extended accent cream, and use those 4 colors to kind of integrate them into the logo. And then here's how this would look next to the existing Minnesota logo. So I think Sierra has a link to the SurveyMonkey survey, which shows you all of these options again, and you can take some time with that. I can't remember exactly how long the window is of when that survey will be open, but it's definitely a few days. And you can read through kind of all the notes and different things. There's a PDF linked in there as well. So that's kind of the update right now of where we are with the brand refresh. Does anyone have any questions or comments so far?
Just a quick question. This is Michelle from Bicycle Alliance in Minnesota. I'm wondering if I could share that survey link with my coworkers.
Dave, is that cool? Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just mention we're going to use this survey as sort of our formal way of gathering input on the refined logo concepts and color palettes. But if anyone has any initial reactions or comments after looking at those right away, we can record those in notes too, and we'll also consider that feedback as we refine the logo.
This is Karma with Safe Kids, Grand Forks, East Grand Forks. I love them. I think they look great. The one thing, and I don't know why it just seems a little off on this, is the heart in the Minnesota. And I don't know if it was trying to get at a health aspect of walking, if it was just love our state, but I'm reading maybe too much into that. And I don't know, that was just, my eye gets drawn to that rather than to the other logo icons on the outer side, which I think are more important, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I think initially, yeah, the healthy heart is an interesting interpretation. And then also that caring aspect being a word that kind of came up a lot. So the heart kind of relating to caring, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's drawing the eye too much to it, it's definitely something for us to consider in the next round if we want to keep that or not. Anyone else?
Just looking at the chat box too. Hi, Jimmy. Jimmy agrees with Karma's comment. And then I see a note here from Cindy asking, is there an icon for safety that could replace the heart? So we can maybe look at some other iconography that can go there as well.
My first reaction was replacing it with a tennis shoe, you know, kind of that, the tennis shoe that would be stepping down, kind of a, you know, looking active by being a little bit at an angle. But again, I'd probably have to see that to see if I was distracted by that again. But I just that was a thought to replace it with.
Great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but feel free to keep asking questions.
All right, if that's it for questions on the logo, I'm gonna drop one more survey link in the chat box. So there's two now. One routes to a logo, getting feedback on the draft brand. And the other one is a survey that we talked about a month or two ago. It just covers some needs and opportunities around equity and engagement, some of the other tasks that we're working with on part of this project. We're still doing our best practice review. So if you're able to respond to both of those surveys, one will help us finalize the brand refresh, and the other one will help our team better understand what the resource needs and opportunities are for equity and engagement. And we'll make sure that Dave has both of those. And for both of those surveys, please feel free to share it with your broader Safe Routes networks.
Sierra and Marguerite, do either of you have anything else to add here?
Nope,
I
looking
don't
forward
think
to
so.
getting your feedback.
Thank you.
Well,
Barrett,
great. Thanks. No, I was just gonna say thanks so much. I think it looks great. I really like the designs of the logo, and I'm kind of curious to see where people are drawn. But yeah, hopefully everybody gets a chance to go to that survey and to vote. But with that, I say, yeah, let's pass it over to you, Dave. You got a lot of updates for folks.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to get my slides up. I think my most important update is to reintroduce Kelly Corbin, who's back on the call after an extended redeployment to MDH, but we were able to snag her back, and so we're all pretty happy about that.
I too am very happy to be back and not playing an epidemiologist anymore.
Welcome back.
And apparently I can't talk and share my screen at the same time, so it took me a little longer than I thought. Welcome back, Kelly. Very nice to have you. And just in time for Walk to School Day. So I'm going to run through a couple of updates related to this event, but also we've got a boatload of solicitations coming up that I want to check in with you all about. And you'll note that we've kind of returned from Walk to Anywhere Day to kind of this indecision about what schools are going to look like to boldly hoping that everybody is going to be walking to school or walking somewhere on Walk to School Day. But we have shifted back to marketing the Walk to School Day event for October 6th. The national site that normally handles all of our registration for this isn't open yet. We're kind of hassling them about getting that open, but it should be open this month. And for those of you, I can see a lot of you on this call are working at the regional level or even ship coordinators. The reminder for why it's helpful to sign up on the national site is we get all that information. It helps us better communicate with people that are implementing events. We send out materials and ideas over time. So please, if you're operating a local Safe Routes to School program, get your schools registered for Walk to School Day. And if you're working at a regional or county level, please get the word out that these events are coming up. I think from a recommendation from many years ago, somebody asked that we just at the beginning of every school year share all of the dates so you can get them on your calendar and start working when you work with a principal or a superintendent at the beginning of the year, just be able to say these are our dates. So October 6th is Walk to School Day. Winter Walk to School Day is February 2nd, and Bike to School Day will be May 4th, which is going to be super exciting for Star Wars fans. Because May the 4th be with you, in case anybody didn't know why that was. I don't know. So, like I mentioned, we send out materials. I think schools have found these relatively useful. Some schools don't have color printing available or don't have stickers and zipper pulls to give away. So if you do get registered, you will get a packet from us this year. Last year, we took a hiatus on sending that stuff out. Another reason to be registered. And then please help us promote our photo contest. This is, if you ever see these presentations that just have tons of great photos of kids walking and biking in Minnesota, they come from our photo contest. So please encourage schools to participate. It certainly helps contribute to the energy around Walk to School Day, and they can post those. They can either email them to us. There's information, I think, in a link that Kelly's dropping for you, or they can be posted to the Minnesota Safe Routes to School website or Facebook page with the Minnesota Walks hashtag. And then if you didn't see it, we put out a e-news just last week, I think, that had some other event ideas. Yes, you can do Walk to School Day. You can also organize walking school buses or bike trains for that day. You can run a bus stop and walk, make yard signs or banners. Definitely invite elected officials. Them coming and seeing and being a part of that makes a big difference. and make the students feel like it's something special to be doing it. You know, I don't know how high fives are going to work out. It's an old slide, but you know, yeah, elbow bumps, says Kelly Corbin. Is that MDH approved as elbow bumps? You don't know, it's not on the list. So those are a couple of things going on with Walk to School Day. We'll certainly be in front of you in September, but we kind of figured with school officials being more difficult to get in touch with, given some of what they're working with the pandemic, it might be good to get started early. I couldn't remember if we talked about this much on the last call, so I thought I would brush over it. But for those of you that were paying attention, during the legislative session, two chunks of funding went to different programs that are run through the Minnesota Department of Transportation. One, Safe Routes to School. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but also our active transportation program, which was not funded and didn't exist many years ago, but more recently, we created a framework for it without any funding, and the legislature added $5 million to this program over the next, I don't know, it's going to be 4 or 5 years. And so we're busy at MnDOT working on what that active transportation program is going to look like. I would imagine that many of you in the work that you do around schools probably are also doing work around active living in your communities. And so knowing that this program exists and that will be a resource for you in the future, I think is helpful. You know, it is based off of the Safe Routes to School program in many ways. It's kind of a safe routes to everywhere for everybody kind of idea. And it's going to help rural and urban communities improve places for people to walk, bike, and roll. And we're going to do that with planning and education and encouragement and investment in infrastructure. While we're still kind of shaking out the details of this, we expect to see some funding for local active transportation planning or bicycle and pedestrian planning, community capacity building around active transportation, more demonstration projects, engineering studies, education initiatives, and potentially piloting something similar to our Safe Routes to School coordinators with active transportation coordinators, either at the regional or district level, MnDOT district level. I'm going to actually pause for a second in case anybody has any questions about what's coming with the active transportation program, or something you're dying to say so that we know about it when we're working on this. I should add that, well, we've been working with internal offices at MnDOT to develop this. We do intend to do a great deal of outreach around kind of final decision making around what this program will look like. Will? I see you got a hand up.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. From the list of possible funding opportunities, are we to understand that there will not be like infrastructure money included in this $5 million?
Oh, sorry. I should have added possible non-infrastructure funding opportunities. The way we're talking about it now, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the funds will go towards infrastructure, with the remaining 20 to 30% going towards non-infrastructure.
Very cool. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Eric, if you see any things that come up in the chat, can you let me know? Because I'm not seeing that right now.
Yep, I'll let you know.
Cool. Thank you. But with that $5 million for Safe Routes to School, it also means that there will be grant opportunities this fall. And so I wanted to get those on your radar, talk about that a little bit today, answer any questions you might have so that you're prepared in October when the majority of these solicitations will open up. A quick breakdown of what we saw at the legislature in terms of funding. They re-upped on the 1 million every 2 years that funds some of our planning and non-infrastructure activities. So that was helpful, and we were happy to see that. We also had, I don't know if you all remember, 2 years ago, $3 million in bonding funds for Safe Routes to School infrastructure projects, but we didn't have a staff in place at the DOT that could manage those projects. And so we held off on that solicitation. And while we were holding off, the legislature then went ahead and passed another $5 million in general funds for safe routes to school. We haven't exactly decided how that money will be divided, but it is a safe guess to imagine that a majority of that will go towards infrastructure, and maybe a small slice for non-infrastructure. So what that means for this fall is that there's nearly $8 million available for infrastructure funding, which I can say in my time at MnDOT, which is coming up on 6 years, we haven't had that much money for a state-funded solicitation available. So that's the big deal. So with those funds, we're planning to have a couple of different grant solicitation types. You can expect planning assistance. You can expect to see our boost or non-infrastructure implementation activities grants. You know, the TA program continues to have an annual solicitation for greater Minnesota, not the 7-county metro, and our state infrastructure solicitation, as I just mentioned. I think on the table right now, and we haven't made any decisions, but we will know for certain by October, because that's when a solicitation would open. We potentially will be looking at local coordinators or district safe routes to school coordinators. Again, we're trying to work out the details of how that might work.
Got a question here. Does TAP equal regional solicitation through the Met Council?
Well, it can, but the Met Council only does that solicitation every 2 years. So they did it in 2020, and I believe they'll do it again in 2022. So yes and no.
Hey, that question came from me. This is Jimmy. So
Hi, Jimmy.
hey, so when you have when your third bullet there, is that not the regional solicitation in 2022 spring?
Well, the third bullet I'm talking about there is the 2021 fall TA solicitation for greater Minnesota. And I'll actually dive into that in a little bit more detail in a second here. So I'll hopefully answer your question when we get to a slide about that.
Cool, thanks.
But I suspect most of you are aware that state funds are the most flexible and the easiest to work with, and communities, particularly city government, prefer them over federal dollars for safe routes to school projects. And so I thought I would lead with our state-funded solicitation. Like I mentioned earlier, it is about upwards of $8 million that will be available. The eligibility for that really is everyone except for you as an individual, you know, cities, counties, school districts, tribes, townships, schools, both public and private. So all of those are eligible. Of course, if you're a school applying for an infrastructure grant, you would need to have the support of your city or county engineer. There's no match required with the state funds. If you're not familiar and you haven't received a state funded grant before, that means that you don't have to come up with 20% of the costs locally. And this year we're toying with the limits of what is an infrastructure grant in terms of cost. So we lowered the bottom down to 50,000 and raised the top up to 500,000 to see what that might do for the types of projects that we might see. I know that has been a limitation for folks in the past on both ends. And then per the strategic plan, this will be the first time, I think, that we are running infrastructure solicitation that is going to be using our student transportation equity for priority populations tool to score applications. So applications will have an equity aspect to them. And it's something to keep in mind, perhaps, when you, as thinking at the regional level about safe routes, might be talking to folks about projects. There may be some that would score higher with the equity tool than others that you may choose to focus your time talking with. Also, if you're new or maybe just an update, if you've been around a really long time, Safe Routes funding funds things like trails and sidewalks and crossing improvements. Those are the types of projects that you can fund with these grants. And there's really two types of project types that we're looking for this solicitation. The construction of a project from A to Z. But also there's an opportunity if you are working with a community that was federally funded for through the TA program for Safe Routes, has a project that they're planning, but it's not going to be built until 2024, 2025, and they could use a 20% match support. That is something that is eligible in this solicitation. And I think most of you know that all solicitations have a preference towards communities that have a Safe Routes to School plan that call out these projects as priorities. In this case, we're talking about infrastructure. It is more likely to be funded if it's in a Safe Routes to School plan. And maybe you have a boatload of questions that I didn't answer, hopefully not too many. There are 3 webinars coming up. All of them are identical to talk about this infrastructure solicitation. They're on the slide here. I think Kelly is dropping a link to the grants page. And there's actually a PDF on there that you could, if you wanted to share this with folks that you work with, you can download that PDF. It has all of the information on the different trainings, and you can send that out to folks that might be interested in attending and learning more. And then one last piece on the state and infrastructure solicitation. This says draft timeline, but I think it's our final timeline at this point in time. The solicitation kicks off at the beginning of October, just before Walk to School Day. You have a month basically to submit a letter of intent, which is a very short version of a application. And then that kind of puts you in line to have discussions with folks about your project, make sure it's a Safe Routes project, make sure it's one that you think is competitive. And then the full application for that project would be due in early January. Pausing for questions.
Dave, could you say anything about student tallies or parent surveys that might be required as part of the application, or what else you might require that we should think about before?
Certainly. So none of it is required currently. I will tell you that I think I said this at the beginning, like a Safe Routes to School plan is preferred and that it shows priority. I know that we are currently having some discussions about how we might better evaluate an infrastructure project that is funded. So to say, Jimmy, I think you were asking, like, I think I talked about the Safe Routes plans because if you've done a Safe Routes plan, you've done a parent survey and you've done a student tally, right? Unless you did a Safe Routes plan this past year, then you may have skipped the student tally aspect of it because we didn't feel like it was going to be relevant data to the future. But we are talking about, should you be funded, how we might go about evaluating the impact of that project. And so there may be aspects of that contract that would include either dollars for evaluation or requirement for additional evaluation. But we haven't settled on that yet. So that's just the rumor mill for now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. You started, Jimmy, to ask about TAP or TA infrastructure grants. This has been something that has been run annually for Safe Routes to School and bicycle and pedestrian related projects. There is one, as we mentioned earlier, that's run through the Met Council that is every other year. The one that is run in Greater Minnesota is annually. It does use federal funds, requires a 20% match. I'm using general timeline here because the person who oversaw this at MnDOT central office moved to a different position. So we haven't filled that position, but the solicitation is still happening. And it follows very similar to the state Safe Routes to School solicitation timeline, in that there's a letter of intent due in October. There's a review period, a final application, in early January, and project selection by either early April to late early March, depending on what region you're in. Any questions on TA?
This is Karen. I'm confused, and that's not unusual. And so I need clarification. So in the past, have we ever had a state infrastructure application? I thought in the last few years, TAP was part of that. So is this new, what the webinars are going to tell us, is this new funding, or I just misunderstood in the past?
All right, so we are talking about two different funding sources, but we're talking about ways to fund safe routes infrastructure projects. So let's say you have a safe routes infrastructure project, you want to fund it. One option, and I would argue is probably the favorable option, would be to apply for state safe routes to school dollars. That's one solicitation. Unfortunately, like you mentioned, over the past couple of years, we tried to combine these two solicitations because we thought, well, this is a safe routes infrastructure project. Why wouldn't we just, have those compete in the same pool? But the difference in funding sources and some other like logistical process related issues prevented us from doing that successfully. There were other reasons. So now we run them separate. So if you have a safe routes project that you want to get funded, you have two options, particularly where you're located, Karen, because the TA solicitation's open in Greater Minnesota. So you could apply for state funds, which are eligible for all over the state, Metro or Greater Minnesota, or you can use the TA funding pot and apply there, which is this year just for Greater Minnesota. Did I clarify that, or did I muddy the waters more for you? I don't know which one I did.
You clarified, because this is exciting, that there's more opportunities for funding. And I thought there would be with the $8 million, but now I can really see it clearly. And so these webinars that are coming up are for the state, not for TAP.
Correct.
Great.
And I think Kelly shared the link to the TA grants. And they have plenty of information on their website if that's something you want to explore as well. I know that what sometimes happens with this is folks will apply to both to improve their odds. I can't tell, Karen, if you're still out there, so I'm gonna move on.
Please do.
Okay. Oh, there you are. What other solicitations do we have? We also have planning grants. A lot of you are familiar with what these are, but I just want to give a quick rundown of what we're funding, which is what Safe Routes to School planning grants will fund is either a regional development commission planner or a consultant here in the Metro that will work with your community to take you through the Safe Routes to School planning process. And that is everything from forming a diverse team of professionals and community members that will do some initial evaluation and surveying to understand what barriers might exist, and then help the community put together generally about a 5-year plan that is full of strategies to directly address those barriers to make it safer and easier for kids to walk and bike to school. And that final plan is really useful if you are advocating for safe routes, because not only does it bring this team together that then hopefully carries that plan forward, but it also gives you a little bit of a roadmap for future solicitations. Like maybe you really want to be doing in-class bicycle and pedestrian education, and so you know that you're going to get your PE teacher trained, and then maybe you're going to apply next year for a bike fleet so that you have that. And then you recognize that there's not as many safe places to ride in your community as you'd like, and there's a couple of priorities that came out of your plan that might be infrastructure projects in the future. So planning grants are super helpful like that. This application timeline follows almost identically to the other solicitations. The eligibility as well applies here, and the use of the STEP tool, or the Student Transportation Equity for Priority Populations tool, that will weigh heavily on these applications. And something, Karen, that you've asked in the past, and I think I want to reiterate, both with the state infrastructure and with Safe Routes non-infrastructure dollars, is something we learned last year, is that grouping applications by community size or classification by the League of Minnesota Cities classification for cities has helped us both use an equity score to ensure that the funding is going to schools that are of priority populations, but also adjust for the fact that perhaps a small community in greater Minnesota wouldn't compete well in terms of an equity score with Minneapolis or St. Paul, for example. We also have some webinars for these planning grants that will be coming soon. I think you'll see a link here to where we'll post those, but we also will be back on this call and share direct links to get that on your calendars for mid to late October, I think is when we currently are looking at. Just one more solicitation to talk about, just one. And then we have our boost grants, my personal favorite, because that's really when we get to see the personality of communities come out in terms of what they want to be doing with their programming. So you can fund everything from a fleet of bicycles. We've seen St. Paul fund basically a community-led bike shop where students are fixing up bikes for the community. We've seen walking school buses funded in terms of staff time and curriculum development, as I've talked about before, in terms of the street harassment curriculum that Minneapolis has been working on for their middle school students. So what else about Boost? Same timeline, same eligibility, same equity considerations, a preference towards communities that have a Safe Routes to School plan that calls that program out or whatever it's supporting, and webinar dates coming soon. One last thing I want to add about that, for those of you that are working at a regional or county level, or maybe even a district level, and you're trying to think about, well, what do you do with these opportunities? How do you talk to people about them? Some of you remember that we developed this online map that we call the Visualizing Safe Routes in Minnesota tool, where we tried to dump everything from participation and walk and bike to school days to communities that have safe routes plans or bike fleets, or that have gotten infrastructure grants. And this is online, you can go to it, and each of those is a different layer. So if I were thinking about like how I might advance safe routes through planning in my region, I would pull this map up. I would populate the walk to school day layer and the planning layer and then the school locations layer. And what you're looking at here is an example of that. And now I can see that Howard Lake has a Safe Routes to School plan, and so does Becker, but all of these tan dots are communities that don't have any activity around Safe Routes to School. And that can be an opportunity to do some outreach, talk to those schools about potentially everything from participating in Walk to School Day, by the way, which would be a great foot in the door with these communities, but also applying for planning assistance. You can use the same map if you're thinking about boost grants to perhaps reach out to the Safe Routes to School teams where there are Safe Routes to School plans, and talk to them about what strategies they might have in their Safe Routes plan that they might want to try and fund with boost funding. So I encourage you to try and use this map if you're trying to work strategically with partners. This is a great way to do it, and it is readily available for you on our website. Michelle, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. If I can ask a quick question. That if you are looking on the Visualizing Safe Routes to School tool and you see that a community has a Safe Routes to School plan, but it's from 2015 or 2014, would you suggest that they update that plan? So I'm thinking you had referenced a Safe Routes, a 5-year Safe Routes to School plan. So if you see a plan that was written more than 5 years ago, should that community, are you recommending that that community update their plan?
It depends. And here's how it depends. If that community had that plan and did nothing with it for the past 5 years, I'm not sure what an update is going to do. So one of the questions that we ask on our application for planning is, if particularly if they're asking to fund an update to a plan, is what did you do with the last plan? Because at least in my experience with schools, like 5 years later, you got a different Safe Routes team. You probably have a different principal. You have a different parent that cares about walking and biking. Your team has shifted a lot. So I would be talking about picking up an old plan if it hadn't been implemented. But if they have implemented a lot of it, to me, an update would make sense. Of course, we're around. So if you have any follow-up questions on this, or you have identified a school you want to work with and apply for funds, feel free to reach out to Kelly or I. We'd be happy to talk you through any questions that you have. And also join us for a webinar. We'll try to answer in more detail some of the questions about the specific solicitations then.
I just have to say that I am very excited to see all of these grant solicitations opening up, learning that $5 million of general fund money has been approved. And, it's so exciting to have that availability for our Safe Routes to School for our kids in our schools. And I'm just extremely excited. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Michelle, I'm glad you share the sentiment. We're pretty jazzed too. And I didn't mention this because, you never know what's going to happen in the future, but it's looking very much like the federal infrastructure bill might become law. And that includes additional federal funds. It reinstates the Safe Routes to School program as a program nationally, and provides funding for it, as well as active transportation dollars. So there's, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I were to guess, I think that it looks like the next few years at least will be great for Safe Routes. And Eric, I apologize. I took a lot of time right there.
No, it's all
You'll
good.
learn this about me. I'm notorious for taking more time than I'm allowed.
It's all great information, and I think really useful. And I'd say thank you for Kelly for everything in the chat has been great. So when we send out the notes today, I'll make sure to capture the chat again that has all these great links. So if you haven't got them there, you'll be able to find them in the notes later if you come back to the MnDOT website looking for the notes.
And I would agree with Karma's note about the link to the recording as soon as possible. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I will try to get it up, or we will try to get it up as soon as possible. That shouldn't be a problem. Still just working through the kinks as we kind of do this for the first and second time here.
I'll just put a plug in for the old network calls. If you missed a month, you can go on and watch them. We post them all on that page, but they're on YouTube. So if you are out going for a walk, you can listen to them that way. And you can also speed them up. So if you're in a pinch for time, you don't necessarily have to block off an hour. You could probably get it done in 30, 45 minutes. And I found them really helpful as I was getting back up to speed to watch them. So I encourage you to do that.
Great. Well, does anyone else have any questions either about branding redesign or any of the information that Dave has covered? I think today we're going to kick it down the line one more time, possibly to have that small group discussion. But I think this has been really a great call. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining today. And again, if you have further questions, reach out to Dave, Kelly, myself, and we'll get back to you in the interim. So thanks, y'all.
Look at that. Sophie popped on just long enough to see that she had a last